Try to keep this relatively brief. Can tell you a little bit about ERA, a little bit about what accelerators are, and then mostly about the kind of questions and what folks are looking for in accelerators. And let's get to Q&A. And if I'm getting feedback from this, someone just give me a sign. So what's an accelerator? No, not one of these. We're talking about accelerators, we're talking about startup accelerators, and there's a lot of forms of them, but generally it's about giving companies a lot of help and a little bit of money to help them reach their goals. ERA is New York's largest and oldest homegrown accelerator. We've been around 7 years now, invested in more than 165 companies. We'll tell you more about what that means, but we're coming in at the very, very earliest stages of companies compared to what we just heard from Ellie. And they've now gone on to be worth more than $2 billion in total. That's not a lot if you're starting out in the private equity stage, but when you're starting at day one, it's been great to see the whole New York ecosystem growing over the last couple of years. A little bit more about us. We've run these 15 cohorts. I'll tell you more about what that means, but it's the way we work with companies over time. We do this with a very broad platform, along with a team of 10. We've got 10 venture partners and a whole lot of mentors I'll talk about in a minute. In general, you'll find with accelerators, it's about how to provide a very big tent that can give companies a lot of help along the way. We're not expecting companies to have a lot of the things figured out that someone like Ellie is. We're willing to help you get there, and that's how the model works. We've invested, I mentioned, 165 companies. These are virtually all software companies, about 90% software, 10% CPG or a little bit of hardware. They are about 60% B2B, about 45% B2C. Some are both. It's not just that we're bad at math. And in general, these companies from all over the world, they're companies that we think can benefit from operating in New York. And that's something we like to make sure that we can help them move faster. I've had a few exits along the way, a few of them here. That's great, good for them. Anyway, I'm trying to speed this along. So when we think about, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, we think about accelerators, the whole generation of accelerators you see were generally started to be able to help companies at the earliest stage in a hands-on way. There's a lot of things that someone like Ellie is expecting a company to have worked out that we're willing to work with them on. And these are things like figuring out exactly who your customer is, how to refine your product, how to test for product market fit, and actually not just do this in a way where we're just telling you to go off and figure it out, but actually working with you directly with our broad mentor network to be able to help you make progress on those things. The way our particular model works is we run 2 cohorts a year. That means we'll talk more about applications in a minute, but we invest in companies and they move in with us to our space for 4 months. During that time, we're working with them to try to figure out whatever matters for them about their business, trying to take a lot of things off the table that don't matter, coming up with a very clear set of, we call them KPIs, things that do, and helping them make progress in a rapid way. By definition, this means we're looking for companies that in 4 months can figure out something about their business that can be proved out. And we'll talk more about that in a minute here. But as I mentioned, we do this with a very broad group of mentors. These are 500 folks who are serial entrepreneurs, industry experts. They're folks who are functional experts, executives, in general, people who know what they're doing from a whole lot of companies that you know about, who agree to volunteer their time to be able to help contribute to the broader ecosystem here and be able to help companies with specific areas that they may need assistance with. And this can be anywhere from how to make sure you've got the right product, to how do you make sure you're crafting your sales pitch to the right customer, to how do you build a sales team, and everything in between. In terms of the things, it looks like the fonts are not coming in right, but just what are the types of things you can look for in an accelerator? And again, there's a broad list, helping with things like building product, engineering, recruiting, sales, marketing, retention, and then helping you with back office things like legal and accounting. We do this not just day one when they're in the accelerator, which is product creation and validation, but also the way we work with companies, even after that 4 months is over, we continue to work with them as they grow along the way. We do this, I'm not going to waste a lot of time here, with a goal-driven model with KPIs, where we're trying to get companies to test certain things about their company, about what they're doing could be around customer acquisition, and then be able to get that feedback, make changes rapidly, and iterate from there. So, let's get to the more interesting part. What makes an accelerator program a success is something we're asked all the time. What can I hope to get out of it? And the short answer is, you should see some sort of, hopefully, meaningful improvement about your business. Whether that means you're proving customer product fit, product market fit, or if you're very lucky, scalable sales model. And basically, are you able to validate something which makes you a lot more valuable as a business, hopefully better positioned to scale it, and perhaps even be able to raise money from folks like Ellie? So when are you ready to apply to an accelerator? And I wish I had an answer. The answer is, it depends. You thought that Harvard had tough admissions? Well, most accelerators have lower admission rates than that. I mean, someone like us, we're looking at something like 1% of applications we see get admitted. Now, that's not to say don't apply. I think you should, but it's just to kind of set the expectations for what you're looking at. We start with over 1,000 applications. We interview about 120 companies first round. So right off the bat, you've got to catch your attention with something that looks interesting, different, exciting, and we'll talk more in a minute about what that means. But it's a high bar. And then from there, we're looking to get to know more about your business, more about your team, all the way down through multiple rounds of interviews before we get to the end. And one big difference about an accelerator from, again, someone like Ellie, we're going to do more of our diligence later on in the process. We're not going to go detailed and look at 1,000 companies. It's just not going to happen. What we are going to do is look for something interesting about a subset of those companies and then get to know you more along the way. So if you're thinking about accelerators, that's something that you want to make sure is pretty clear. So what are accelerators looking for? Basically, you'll hear this from most investors. Number one, team at the very early stage. Number two, market opportunity. And number three, business model. Basically, we're not expecting a lot in terms of your business model, but we are expecting you to have a team that we want to back for the very long haul. But every VC says that. So what does it mean when they want an A team? No, not those folks, although maybe we take them. But we're looking for, sorry about these fonts here, we're looking for some specific things. Number one, overall talent, which is obvious. Either are you intelligent, are you competent, have you demonstrated problem solving, have you demonstrated leadership in some way? But most of all, we're probably looking for grit. We're looking for evidence that this is a team that's not going to give up, that's going to keep going, because every startup, as early as we look at them, is going to have problems. There'll be reasons for founders to quit. And we're looking for teams that are going to work through that. We're looking for a fit for this opportunity. You may be really smart folks, but why are you going to do this one? And do you have any unique insight on the problem? What is it that you see that makes you and your team different to go after this than the 1,000 other companies out there? And then last, if we can find evidence of team execution even early, that's still important. Maybe you've worked with your co-founder on something else previously, building another tech product, for example. Or maybe you've got initial customers who love you. That's an evidence that your team can work together to build something, and that's going to be important for any really early stage investor. So, second, market opportunity. What's a compelling market opportunity? Sorry, with any of the old folks here. But plastics. No, just this is The Graduate for folks who don't know. Anyway, attractive market opportunities, what do they require? First, large addressable markets. This means not just compelling in size, but also something that you can access as a company. Healthcare may be $1 trillion market. That's great. That doesn't help me understand why your company is going to have a total addressable market, serviceable addressable market. And if you don't know these terms, by the way, look them up, because these are the kind of things investors are going to want to talk to you about to understand, is this really an opportunity that's venture scale? Second, and you've probably heard variations of this, but is the customer problem actually a painkiller versus a vitamin? Is this opportunity something that folks really need to have? Is it something that without it, they're already looking for solutions about, or is it just something which would make their lives a little easier? We call that painkillers versus vitamins, and it's really hard to sell vitamins. It may sound like it'll make your life better, but it's tough. Plausible opportunity for a startup. We're looking for things that at some sort of efficient scale you'll be able to go after. If, for example, you want to build bridges, that's great. Building bridges is a wonderful thing. It's not really a plausible opportunity for an early stage startup to go out and do without a ton of funding, so it wouldn't be for our model. And then last, when we're thinking about opportunities, can you create an unfair advantage? Can you create a moat? Is there something about why you're going to be successful that you know? Is it something about your product? Is it something about your relationships? Is there something about your vision that as you start getting customers, especially, you're going to get a bigger benefit and get farther ahead? And these are different for every company, but these are the kind of things that early stage folks, even like us, are looking to understand. One note, customers. Do you know who your customer is? I can't tell you how many pitches we get where we talk to folks and they haven't spent time with customers. Why do customers need this? Do they really need this? Do they really, really, really need this? Founders can talk themselves into a lot of things. We would advise very early, invest time, even before you build anything, listening to your customers. And this is true if it's consumer, this is true if it's B2B. And I'm emphasizing it because it's one of the biggest mistakes we see when we hear pitches. Even if they're interesting founders with interesting ideas, many of them haven't talked to customers at all. Business model. Yes, I put it last. Do they matter? Usually, they still do, despite what you see on TV. So this is with apologies to South Park, and if you remember this, collect underpants, phase 2, make a lot of money. You wouldn't believe how many plans we see that look like this. So what does that mean for startups with business model? We're not expecting you to have earnings per share. We're not expecting you to really understand how you're going to go public. We're looking for, does the dog eat the dog food? Do you have any metrics that you can talk about? Anything about users, growth, retention, maybe even paying customers that can help inform why this model can work? Anything about unit economics, things like LTV to CAC, churn. I won't even define these things, but these are things you should be familiar with. These are things that can talk about value at the earliest stages, and even accelerator investors are going to be asking about them. Capital efficiency. Is this something you can build on or prove out on a relatively small amount of money? It's not that it needs to be small forever, but it needs to start out small. Scalable sales model. Is there a way that you're going to be able to scale the sale of this product? And finally, test whatever you can. We recognize you're not going to be able to prove out everything, but whatever you can, test it. Give data, share data, prove your assumptions. It's amazing these days how much you can prove pretty cheaply. And finally, how early is too early? We're asked this all the time. Need a miracle? Always give it a try, but here's what an accelerator is going to look for. Your team, we want your team to be committed to it. And Ellie alluded to this earlier. If someone tells us, I'm not full-time in the company, that's great. We understand why. We're also unlikely to be interested. If you're not ready to bet on yourself, we're unlikely to want to bet on you also. Second, clear customer case that you can articulate. Third, market opportunity that's addressable for you, that you know how you're going to go after. A working product, we almost always want to see a working product of some sort. Some sort of evidence of execution, great if you've got revenue. If not, customers. If not, some evidence that you've been able to create something that goes after your vision. And finally, sufficient runway to be able to execute. We want to make sure that if we're looking at teams, you're going to have time to be able to give yourself an at-bat, to use a baseball analogy since we are talking about the playoffs here. We want to make sure you've got a plan to be able to give yourself a chance to succeed. And last, you got to catch our attention. At this stage, we want something that's exciting, something that's different, something that shows us that you've got a clear vision that if you're right, we would actually care about.
We also had quite a number of questions for you as well. The first one, though, we oftentimes hear the word incubator when speaking about accelerators. What does that word mean to you?
So these terms are often used interchangeably, unfortunately. In general, what an incubator does is builds companies from the ground up. They might put teams together. They might marry teams with an idea. What most accelerators are looking to do is already invest in companies. So as opposed to having an idea and putting a team together, we're looking for you to already have an idea, a team, and a business that you've started. And so that's the key difference.
Okay. So with so many options like Y Combinator and ERA, what's the best way that a startup should evaluate an accelerator?
Number one is talk to folks who've been through them. I always tell people to talk to our alumni founders. For us, they're on our website, but really any program you're looking at, talk to the founders who've actually worked with the team, who've been through the programs and can speak to them. I think each accelerator has its own flavor. I think there's a lot of good ones out there. It's a matter of finding one that's the right fit for you and your team.
And so how flexible are term sheets when dealing with these accelerators?
So again, this varies. Ours is not. We operate at scale that we have a very standard deal. We give companies $100,000 for 8% common stock. That is the deal that we offer, and it's not a valuation of companies. We have companies that can come in having raised $0 or raised $1.5 million. We've got companies that can have no revenue or $2 million. They all get the same deal from us, and so as we tell them all, we're not giving you a valuation. It's just how we work with companies.
Besides not being fully invested, what are some top things people should avoid doing when pitching to an accelerator?
Oh, there's a lot of things they should avoid. I think Ellie went through some of them. I mean, I think number one, remember you are talking to an investor. We sometimes get folks at the very early stage who are throwing ideas at us. It was great if we want to sit there and talk over coffee, but if you're going to come and pitch an idea in a business, we're expecting you to still have a concept of the problem, the solution, what your business could look like, and why you're doing it. And it's amazing how many basic questions at the very early stage are often unknown. Things like, what is your market? We want you to know something about your market, your competition. Who are they? We're not expecting you to be able to give us a 5-page essay on them, but how are you different from what's out there? These are a few of the things, but basically treat it like you are giving a business a full business pitch or discussion, even if you are very early.
So what if you absolutely bomb the pitch and you're turned away? What alternatives do you have?
Well, one thing is we have people bomb the pitch all the time that we still keep talking to. I mean, it's one thing about being at the accelerator stage. Sometimes we'll be looking for what actually is interesting there, even if they do bomb it. It makes it harder, but it happens. But to your question, especially at the early stage, we do run into founders that we think are doing interesting things, but are just still too early, or we just don't think they have a clear enough plan, so for 4 months we're going to make progress. And we keep in touch with them. There are at least 10 or 12 companies that we've invested in, and I could be underestimating, that we have turned down once, that we then invested in later on. I mean, we love getting to know companies, and the best thing you can do if we turn you down is to show us that evidence of execution, is to show us what you're building, show us you can get things done. And at the earliest stage, again, we look at it a little differently. Just because you're too early now doesn't mean you're not. You might be great in 6 months.
Mm-hmm. And what happens with buyer's remorse? Say if your partnership is no longer working and you want to potentially leave, how do you deal with that?
You mean leave? I'm sorry, leave.
Beneficial to either the startup or the accelerator. What if it's no longer working?
So we are investors in your company. I mean, if somebody joined the accelerator in a weekend and says this is the wrong fit, we would say, hey, we would take a step back and say, okay, great, let's go our separate ways. I mean, once we've invested in the company and worked with them for 4 months, we're like any other investor on the cap table in that way. But that's why I think both for an investor, but also especially for a founder, to spend time getting to know the platform, the people involved in it early on is really important. I mean, for us, it's a marriage. It's for the long haul. Once we start working with companies, we're there, cradle to IPO, as I like to say.
So what's the best and worst pitch you ever heard?
Best and worst pitch.
That's a good question. That one.
Oh, I don't know. The pitches we hate are the straight clones. Like over time, you'll see even for one point it was Groupon for X, then Pinterest for Y, then Uber for Z, and they're just so unoriginal that it gets hard to get excited. There are a couple categories that we also laugh about because we always see pitches and we don't understand why people think they're interesting. So I'll give you an example. One is social travel. A lot of entrepreneurs go out on the road, they have a fun time traveling, and they come back and say, I want to build a company around it. It's great, it's a passion. Almost none of them make sense as companies. The other one is nightlife finders. Now, again, I know how these things get created, but every single cohort, we get pitches for nightlife finders. And you just can't convince me that's going to be a venture scale business. It's also generally created by folks who just want to get into nightclubs. Anyway, those are examples of some of the things. In terms of the best pitch, I don't want to name company names because on the best side, but we've had some folks who've actually come in and demonstrated kind of a very, very clear vision for all of the company, and also detailed answers for all the things we've talked about, that they understand, they've talked to customers, they've got a real sense of how they're going to address the market. And I guess, above all, I started with it, I'm going to reiterate it again, they've got you can see a very clear roadmap for how they're going to do something both tomorrow and in the future. And we recently asked, what's the difference between the good and the great companies in our portfolio? And, my answer is always, the difference is the great companies were able to start out doing something well, and then were able to see a bigger opportunity and move beyond that. And I think you see that with people. You talk about the grandest scale, Amazon, right? Well beyond being a bookseller. Google, well beyond, just offering AdWords at this point. And so I think we're looking for founders who can not only execute on that first opportunity, but are then going to be able to see a grander one beyond that. And again, that's for the truly great companies.
Can you talk a little bit about your own company, Music Gremlin, how that whole process of VC funding worked, and ultimately Sandus taking it over?
Sure. Well, actually, I've got just two different companies that I started and took to exit. So I'll give the quick contrast between them. So my first was a musical instrument e-commerce company called Music 123 that we launched in 1999. If you remember history, it was a great time to be operating a B2C e-commerce company. We were effectively angel financed and we're going to be VC financed, and then the bubble popped and term sheets disappeared. We actually ended up being only angel financed and becoming actually a profitable company, number 2 in the space, and grew our way through it. And then was that company exited, it's now owned by Guitar Center. You can still go buy a guitar there today. But that was an example of, you don't need VC money. Gremlin was VC backed. We were a software and hardware company raising multiple rounds of venture capital. This was a different age. We actually needed to raise money to really build our first product. We built the world's first Wi-Fi MP3 player. We built some very complex enterprise software. And so that was when we raised money even to really get started. Things are a little leaner these days. You don't necessarily have to do that. And on that one, we looked for different kind of investors. When we started, first it was seed, then it was A, then it was B. And again, there probably aren't a lot of hardware folks in the room today. And then that company also, built through exit and then sold to SanDisk. So very different ways to finance companies. And there's pluses and minuses. I'd be the first one to tell any founder, VC is not for everyone. There's good and bad. It's really, is it a good fit for what you're trying to do? Example, e-commerce company is something that may be easier to be able to bootstrap. Second, somewhere where you're trying to actually invent new kinds of hardware and technology is probably hard to be able to bootstrap. So anyway, I don't know if that answered the question.
No, that's great. Thank you. And so we have a couple questions for both of you, if you don't mind joining us as well, Ellie. So a question about supporting underrepresented founders. What are you doing to support women, minorities, and people of color to get a fraction of venture capital and also, get involved with accelerator programs? So I guess if you want to start. Yeah.
Can you start?
Sure, go ahead.
Good question. So we, two things. One, we try very hard with Number one, we try very hard with recruiting to be able to expose ourselves to a lot of groups which may be less common in venture capital. We actually just ran a female founders event last week, and we've done them for 5-6 years now. Our overall portfolio is about 38% with teams with a female co-founder, which puts us pretty high, I think, if you look at the list. Our view is we want to make ourselves accessible to everyone, and we want to be able to create an environment that folks can succeed in. One of the things we do is we do have a very diverse mentor group, and one of the things that makes a difference is having mentors who don't just come from all the different walks of life, but also look like a lot of different ways. And so I think that's something, by far we're not perfect, but something we've tried really hard to do. And I think at that point for us, some of the alumni then speak to that, which helps increase that. So, we're always trying, I think we do a lot, but we're always trying to do more. But
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we're investing in them. It's really where the rubber meets the road is, are they actually getting money and what can we do? And part of that is we have 2 female partners in a partnership of 6. That makes us the top of most lists, which is a little bit pathetic, but is just the reality. The decision makers in venture are 91% male. So there's a little bit of that. You can show up on the website and see, they're probably going to be open to talking to someone like me. But again, we can always be better, and we're certainly thinking about it, talking about it, and doing what we can to make sure that we're seeing the broadest range of people, broadest range of ideas, because I think the founders of tomorrow and the companies of tomorrow are going to look different.
Great. So this is also for both of you. Do you provide any finding co-founder or founding member of the team services? So kind of like a Match.com for co-founders.
No.
So you asking, do we match founders?
Can you find like co-founders or founding members for people who already have companies, like services to pair them?
So no, we like to find, we're investing in teams. We will certainly help with recruiting, and we'll help add members to teams, but we don't, that's the question, we don't match make co-founders, and not willingly.
Yeah, I actually think that brings me to a different point, right? It's hard to invest in a team that is just met and that is just formed. Right? We want to see that you've had some success working together. Again, as John said, working together on something. or maybe you've been working on this idea for some period of time. But co-founder problems are common, and they're a common reason that companies fail, particularly in the earliest stages. And you're just really ratcheting up that risk by jumping into what is going to be a 7, 10, sometimes longer than that year endeavor with someone you don't know particularly well and haven't spent a bunch of time with.
Just to add to that, it is for companies of ours that fail quickly, it is 100% because of team problems. We've gone back and looked at the data. For the teams that, not every company succeeds, but the teams that fail fast for us, it's 100% team problems. And that speaks to the concern. Yeah.
So in that same vein, someone submitted a question. MJ, how important is a multiple founder team from your perspective?
We've invested in both. So, I think it can be good to have someone to kind of shoulder the burden with. So if it's a single founder, what I'm looking for is an awareness, and probably you've built a pretty extensive external support network. So whether it's having pretty close advisors, whether it's having formed a board earlier than someone else might, or if you've, just kind of found your own way to recreate it in some way, shape, or form, I think it's important because it can be an awful lot over time. But then, too many co-founders can also be a problem for reasons that we discussed. So there isn't a magic number, but, on the margin, do I prefer it? Probably.
Yeah, I agree with what Ellie said. We actually have a strong bias towards co-founders. Running a startup is hard. Having another founder, especially as early as we're looking, is very helpful. It's also, for us, some of the evidence of recruiting. If you can get someone else to buy into your vision at the very earliest stage, it's a good pattern. It's not 100% for us, but it's a strong preference. The other thing we have a strong preference for is a technical co-founder on the team. Again, for us, there's reasons why at our stage we think that matters. It's not 100% again, but a strong preference.
Mm-hmm. This is for both. And actually our last question, how do you estimate your own valuation for your company?
Sorry, you mean
I guess, how do you estimate your valuation?
When we're giving term sheets to
companies, yeah,
really
when people are evaluating.
Sure. It's an art, not a science, let's be honest. These companies are too early for it to really be a science. So it does tend to be, you're essentially backing into, there's certainly market benchmarks. So similar companies have been valued at what recently. So there's that, there's a certain market that when you're in the market, you kind of get a sense of what the market is. It also does tend to be at the earliest stages tied to how much you're raising. So, you're not going to raise a $5 million round at a $5 million pre-money, right? That math is just not going to work. So, sometimes that does tend to lead it. But of course, it is ultimately about what you've proven. So sometimes we'll see that a company has raised a seed round at a pretty healthy price and then is coming to us, but we feel like that was just overpriced. So we're not willing to necessarily give you more than that. And if it's a note, there's different ways to finance companies, but if you've got a convertible note, let's say you have a cap and a discount, that cap is not necessarily where your round is going to be. And there are circumstances where that's just not the right price and we'll make it lower. So it is also about what you've actually done and what you've proven and what, we're also looking forward. We're thinking, are you going to be able to, from where you are today with the amount of money you're raising, really hit this next set of milestones, really grow the value of the business by a significant amount. And then if we think you need more money, which almost 112% of the time you do, what's that round going to look like? And, hopefully you're getting a 2x at least markup on that round, right? Hopefully you've driven enough value to be able to get that. You don't want to overprice an early round because it just makes the company really difficult to finance down the road.
One last question, I lied. Someone wrote, coming in cold, freezing actually. I have a working concept, small fan base. I don't even actually know what Series A even means. What are my next smartest steps? Coming here, learning about fundraising,
So next step could become chat with us. So in terms of just the nomenclature we're using, seed, A, B, seed is usually these days the first round that you're raising. Sometimes there may be the terms have gotten ridiculous. Like there might be a pre-seed round ahead of the seed, which might be your angel money coming in. A seed round is usually the first full, maybe institutional equity round you've raised that helps you get to initial milestones. Your A is usually a round you've raised when you've proven out something about, there's usually product market fit. And again, these are generalities where you're then trying to then start growing the business. And after that, it's about scaling capital. If you don't know anything about those terms, that's fine. The question is, I think what investors just want to know is, what are you building? What's your vision? What have you proved out? It's common things: problem, solution, opportunity, and what's next for you. So I would say, don't get tied up in the terms. You can look online and blogs, by the way, to answer most of this stuff. It's pretty easy. But come talk to people. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. There's tons of free content on the internet all about this stuff. Lots of it. So it's easy to get up to speed. It's first build your business, then you can worry about the intricacies of venture.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you so much, John and Ellie, for joining us this evening.
Thank you
You're
all.
really great. And thank you to all of you for your really awesome questions, and to AWS for hosting us tonight.